Hey everyone, I got a lot of questions about sleep, and hopefully I'm going to try to answer as much of it as I feel comfortable answering on this one video. And again, I realize the irony of my voice putting people to sleep and how boring this will be. At the very least, hopefully this video can help some of you fall asleep. First thing about sleep is that drugs are just one tool that we have. We have a lot of tools to treat sleep. Medication is not our first choice, and that's typically what we do for most diseases. For example, for another disease like heartburn, we want to talk about your diet. What are you eating? What kind of foods might be causing it before we move on to giving you drugs. And it's the same with sleep. We want to emphasize good sleep hygiene. Try not to use your screen too close to bedtime. Minimize exercising or eating close to bedtime, etc., etc. I want to try to find out what else we can try before we just move on to drugs. Secondly is that if there is something causing you to have sleep problems, for example, you have to wake up in the middle of the night to go urinate because your body has some other problem, that's something we need to investigate and try to treat if that's an underlying problem causing your sleep. And so you can see just from all these things you have to consider, the treatment and methodology for treating sleep can become very complicated. Now, we pretty much know that sleep affects other areas of your health, your mental health, your cardiovascular health. I'm saying this because before I was in school, as a pharmacy student, I used to think that if I wanted too much sleep, it's because I'm lazy or I don't have a strong willpower. That's usually not true. If you're tired, it's because your body is telling you it needs to recover, it needs sleep. During the sleep cycle, we know a lot of things are happening. Body is recovering, proteins are being rebuilt. That kind of counteracts our hectic lifestyle. Especially in America, there's this push to always be trying to make money, always trying to go to work, always be doing something. You need to sleep. Like, if you don't get enough sleep, you're not going to be at your peak function. And I wish I knew that when I was in school, when I barely slept at all. And the next thing is that kids and adults have different sleep cycles. For example, teenagers, their body tends to want to go to sleep really late at night and wake up much later. This isn't some moral failing or their fault. This is how their body is at that stage in life. Versus adults, as we get older, we tend to want to sleep earlier and then wake up earlier. So I know this is something like maybe a lot of parents and kids fight about, and hopefully that's something that changes over time as we kind of understand how physiology changes. There are a lot of pediatricians coming out now saying that they suggest schools start later in the day, and so students have enough sleep and they can show up more alert. All right, moving on to the drugs. So there is basically some rough distinctions that might help people think about how we approach these. One is short-term versus long-term. So short-term is roughly less than a month. Maybe you're under a lot of stress or there's something going on in your life. It might be okay to just try a sleeping agent just for the short term, maybe a week or something like that. But obviously we don't want you to be on these longer than you need to be. Longer term, we might try something stronger, but again, we don't want to do this indefinitely. If we can get you off, if we can treat what's causing your sleep problems and what's underlying it, we want to do that and then hopefully not leave you on these medications for a long time. Some treatment principles are you want to consistently, follow up with your doctor and try to use these only under careful instruction, unless it's only for a short term, like maybe a week or so, which I will discuss next. So the way we divide drugs up, at least I think of them, is that there's over-the-counter, which are drugs you can just buy without a doctor's prescription and try, and then there are other drugs that you need a doctor's prescription for, and probably for a good reason. First are what we call antihistamines. These drugs were originally discovered or used to treat allergies, so hay fever, runny nose, etc. But we found out they're very sedating. They make you very tired, and they're actually pretty useful for sleep. And so these are okay, I think, for the layperson to just try it in the short run if you're just having some problems. The side effects, the ones you want to look out for are some people feel really sleepy the next morning. It might cause some mental cloudiness. You might have trouble focusing or thinking if the med is too strong for you. If you notice that, you can switch to something else or avoid using these. And then of course there's always the warning about don't drive or operate heavy machinery right after you take these, or if you know that they're going to impair your function. And also don't mix with alcohol. And I realized after I finished shooting this video, there was something I wanted to say. I put a picture of Tylenol PM just to show that if you see a over-the-counter med with the words PM at the end, what that almost always means is they added some kind of antihistamine like diphenhydramine or another one into the drug so you'll feel sleepy. Other than that, it usually just has Tylenol, just like regular Tylenol. They just added those two ingredients in so that it can do two things at once. I just thought that's interesting for people to know. Okay, the next one is melatonin. So melatonin is a little bit more complicated in how it works, or at least how I think about it. It doesn't directly make you drowsy, but what it does is it mimics the hormone your body secretes when it's time to sleep. Your body has what is called a circadian rhythm. During the daytime, when you're awake, it will secrete certain hormones that will help keep you awake, and then when it's time to sleep, it'll secrete other hormones, and melatonin is one of those. And this is useful, for example, for people who are traveling, if you have jet lag, or if you have some sleep problems, maybe this might be helpful. And I learned not that long ago that melatonin, even though it's over-the-counter in America, it's not over-the-counter in Taiwan. I couldn't find any real problems with using it long term. I think it's okay to try it, but again, they didn't have that many studies either, so I don't want to say never. So maybe in the future there might be a new study, but for the most part, I don't think it's very dangerous to try it, for a short while. All right, next we move on to prescription drugs. So if you're still having sleep problems and you need to see a doctor or professional, these are some of the ones we try. So the first class are benzodiazepines. Simply put as possible without trying to scare anyone, we simplify it by thinking of it as alcohol in a tablet form. That's not exactly what it is, but it's sort of targeting some of the same GABA receptors. Basically what it's trying to do is it does a lot of things that alcohol does. So you may see these drugs used for a lot of different problems, headaches, seizures, muscle spasms, but they're also used for sleep. So I just listed two examples, temazepam and alprazolam. At least in America, they're scheduled medications, so we keep strict controls on these. They're subject to more regulations because there is the potential for abuse or becoming habit forming. The next are what we kind of call non-benzodiazepine. They kind of target the same receptors, but they're not benzodiazepines, so they're used differently. These are just some examples. I just put generic names. I don't want to put brand names because I realize that the brand names might be different in different countries. And again, these are some of the first lines we might try. Benzodiazepines and non-BZRDs, they could potentially be habit forming. And so these should only be taken carefully under supervision of a professional. Next are tricyclic antidepressants. This is sort of like the antihistamines in that we originally used them for another purpose. In this case, they were used to treat depression, and then we found out that some of them are very good for treating sleep, and so this might be another option we could try. I personally always am very cautious about using these, so they're usually not the first one we would try, but they are an option and they are effective. Treatment. So a lot of questions I got were about duration. How long can I take this and what are the side effects? I couldn't find a specific guideline telling you exactly how long you can take every one, and that kind of makes sense because the treatment for sleep is, again, highly individualized. And so there's so many factors we have to look at, and we want to try to figure out what's causing your sleep problems. We want to try to get you off these meds as soon as we can, but some people might need them for a long time. So again, this is going to be something you have to work with your doctor to try to figure out if we can just take these for the short term or stop them when it's appropriate. And this is not a comprehensive list of side effects, but these are some of the ones I wanted to mention. And so I mentioned before that the benzodiazepines and also the non-benzo receptor agonists, these first two class of drugs, are habit forming, meaning that there is the potential for them to cause people to become dependent on them. They're not as likely to do that as something like morphine, but it is still there, so they are controlled medications. And then when we talk about addiction, there's actually different types of nuances to this. So addiction as we typically think of it is people who are seeking the drug, they need more and more of it, and it could really ruin their lives, like with opioids. That's maybe not as likely with these drugs, but there are still, it's not zero, but it's not as much as with morphine. The more likely problems you're going to have with these are what we call withdrawal, meaning that if you take these drugs for a long time and then you just suddenly stop them, you could get a lot of insomnia. Okay, another problem that we think of is tolerance. Tolerance is when you've taken a drug for a long time and then it doesn't work as well. You need to take more and more of it to have the same effect. I just wanted to put it here so that people understand, like for health professionals, when we talk about addiction or dependence, it could mean a lot of different things. The more common one we would see with the benzodiazepine is withdrawal or rebound. And what this is when you stop taking them, especially if you stop taking them right away after you've been on them for a long time, you could have very bad insomnia, or it's like your body is bouncing back. It's like you've been pushing your body in one direction and it's been pushing back really hard, and then suddenly you remove this, it'll just push the other way. And this is a common theme in biology. When you do something to your body, it'll try to compensate, and then when you take away that pressure right away, it might throw everything out of balance. So basically, you don't want to stop these drugs without consulting your doctor to avoid withdrawal and dependence. And so just to recap, I hope this answered a lot of questions about sleep. These are too long and complicated to answer in an Instagram post, but I hope this was helpful. If you like my videos, please send me any feedback. As you can see, I'm still learning. All right, have a great day.